The lecture hall echoed with snickers. Claire, 19, shy, with a voice like morning rain, stood at the front of the room holding a crumpled piece of paper. Her final assignment: share an original poem. She clutched the page with both hands. Her fingers trembled. Across the rows of polished desks and glowing laptops, a sea of ironic eyebrows rose. Hunter, the popular film student, leaned back in his seat and whispered just loud enough. Here comes another trauma dump wrapped in free verse. Laughter followed. Claire's throat closed. But she read anyway. They say broken things don't speak. But here I am, full of cracks and still forming words. The back row laughed again. Someone coughed, mimicking a sob. Claire's voice shook, but she kept going. Not for them, but for her. When she finished, the room was silent. Not in awe. Just uncomfortable. The professor cleared his throat. Thank you, Claire. The brave piece. Brave. Not good. Just brave. Claire nodded, swallowing humiliation like a pill, and walked back to her seat. She could feel their stares burning through her. But one person wasn't looking at her at all. He had just stepped into the back of the hall, quiet, unnoticed, wearing a simple black cap and a threadbare jacket. Keanu Reeves. No one knew yet why he was there. But he had heard every word. And the way he looked at Claire? Like her voice had mattered. Like maybe it had been meant just for him. Claire shoved her poem into her backpack like it was radioactive. She walked fast, head down, the kind of fast that says, "Please don't talk to me, please don't look at me, please let me vanish." Behind her, the class filed out slowly, laughter resuming, but quieter now. Less confident. Almost unsure. Because someone new had been in the room. Someone none of them had noticed enter. Keanu Reeves sat quietly at the back of the lecture hall, still. Observing. He didn't wear sunglasses. He didn't flash a smile. He just sat with the stillness of someone who'd heard more in that poem than any of them could comprehend. And as students passed by, a few glanced his way. Double takes. Was that? Couldn't be. He caught Hunter's eye. Didn't glare. Didn't nod. Just held the gaze. Long enough. And then looked away. Hunter's smirk faltered. Meanwhile, Claire ducked into the nearest girl's bathroom, locking herself in a stall. Her breath came in waves. I shouldn't have read it. I should have written about flowers. Or coffee. Something safe. She didn't cry. She just hid. Outside, the hallway buzzed. Keanu stood by the vending machines, sipping from a water bottle. No fanfare. Just waiting. And when Claire finally emerged 10 minutes later, blinking at the light, she nearly bumped into him. Sorry, she gasped. Then froze. Because that face? That voice? That presence? It wasn't just familiar. It was him. Keanu offered a soft smile. I heard your poem. Claire went pale. Oh my God. You were in the room. He nodded. I'm glad I was. She stared. Not because he was famous. But because, for the first time all morning, someone wasn't laughing. Did it make sense to you? She asked quietly. He tilted his head. Pain always makes sense. Especially when someone has the courage to put rhythm to it. Claire blinked. He wasn't just being kind. He meant it. That line. Full of cracks and still forming words. He tapped his chest gently. That one stays. And just like that, something cracked inside her, not to break. To open. By the time Claire returned to the quad, the energy on campus had changed. Not dramatically. But like the air before a storm, charged, unsure, waiting. Because someone had posted a blurry photo in the group chat. Camera flash. Was Keanu Reeves just in Complet 204? Hunter saw it first. Scoffed. No way. Probably just some old guy with good cheekbones. But then another message came through. I swear to God I made eye contact with him after the poem. I thought he was gonna say something. It was intense. Another. If that was Keanu and he heard what Claire read, I hope y'all feel stupid. Suddenly, the laughter faded. Now it was uncertainty. Now it was regret. Claire didn't know about the chat yet. She was sitting outside, knees pulled up, headphones on with no music playing. Just trying to disappear. Then a shadow fell across her notebook. She looked up. Hunter. Hey, Claire. She flinched. If this is about the poem, I really don't. No, I was gonna say, like, he scratched his neck. The first time he'd ever looked unsure of himself. It wasn't that bad. She stared at him. Flat. Not that bad. Look, some of us laughed, but you kinda overreacted too. She stood. I poured my life into that poem. You poured your opinion into a smirk. Vigil. You don't have to make this a thing. Claire leaned closer. Her voice was quiet, but razor sharp. I didn't. You did. Across the quad, Keanu sat on a bench under a tree, sipping tea from a paper cup. Watching. Not hiding. Just witnessing. A few students passed, whispering. One asked for a selfie. He declined politely. Another just said, "Was that you in Lit 204? He nodded once. She was brave. Claire. Yeah. You think she's like, good? He smiled faintly. She's true. That's better. Word spread fast after that. Claire returned to the next class unsure if she could face it again. Until she opened the door. And saw Keanu sitting in the back. Same cap. Same stillness. Same quiet message in his presence. You belong here. The class was buzzing before the professor walked in. Students glanced at the back row like it was glowing. Because it was true now. Confirmed. Undeniable. Keanu Reeves was sitting in their class. Same seat. Same quiet presence. Only now, everyone knew. Hunter walked in last. His swagger dulled. His voice low. Is he seriously back? Claire was already at her desk, hair tucked behind one ear, eyes locked on her notes. But her heart was a riot. The professor walked in and blinked, clearly surprised. Mr. Reeves. I didn't realize. Please, Keanu said gently. Keanu is fine. The pause. Then the professor smiled awkwardly. Would you care to say a few words before we begin? Murmurs fluttered through the room like paper birds. Keanu stood. Walked slowly to the front. No notes. No performance. Just a man in a hoodie, and a lifetime behind his eyes. I've read scripts with 1,000 lines of dialogue. But nothing has stayed with me longer than a few lines of truth. Like the one Claire read yesterday. He turned slightly toward her. She froze. But he nodded, not for attention, but acknowledgement. You think vulnerability is weakness until you lose something. Then you realize it's all you have left to hold on to. I lost my best friend. I lost the love of my life. I lost time, years I'll never get back. And when I couldn't act or smile or even show up for myself, I wrote. In notebooks. On napkins. On the back of receipts. Not for applause. For oxygen. The room was silent. Not frozen. Just still. Like something sacred had happened. And no one wanted to be the first to break it. So when someone stands in front of you and reads a poem with trembling hands. He looked at Hunter. And you laugh. He paused. Ask yourself, what part of you is afraid of being seen? Hunter looked down. Didn't speak. Keanu turned back to the class. You don't have to love poetry. But if you can't honor someone's courage, maybe sit down until you learn how. He nodded once. Thank you. And returned to his seat. Claire sat motionless. Tears welled, not from sadness. From release. Because someone like him had seen someone like her. And not just seen her, but stood with her. Claire sat on the stone bench outside the English building, the afternoon sun filtering through the branches overhead. Her fingers toyed with the corner of her notebook, the same one that held the poem they laughed at. And the one he'd remembered. Keanu Reeves. The name still didn't feel real in her orbit. But the way he looked at her when she read, that wasn't celebrity. That was recognition. Enough. A cream-colored envelope had been slipped into her backpack. No name. Just her own handwriting, copied perfectly, on the front. Inside, a single card. Some voices don't echo in classrooms. They echo in places that were built to hear them. Quiet table, Thursday at 7 p.m. Suite 203, Baxter Building. No dress code. Just bring your truth. She read it twice. 3 times. Quiet table. She didn't know what it was. But something about the simplicity, the way it didn't try to sell itself, told her it wasn't a prank. It was an invitation. A real one. Claire arrived at the Baxter building just before 7. Concrete walls. No sign out front. Inside, a narrow stairwell, a soft-lit hallway, and a door already slightly ajar. She hesitated, then stepped inside. There were no cameras. No formal chairs. Just a circle of people, 6, maybe 7, all ages, all with notebooks or sketchpads or just their hands in their laps. And in the corner, leaning against the windowsill, quietly sipping tea, Keanu. He looked up, smiled, not surprised. Just welcoming. "Hey, Claire," he said gently. She froze. You invited me?" "No," he replied. "Your poem did." A woman in her 60s scooted over on the couch and patted the space beside her. "You don't have to share," she said. "But you're safe if you do." Claire sat. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a guest in her own voice. She felt like a member. The room at quiet table was filled with the gentle hum of pages turning, mugs clinking, and the unspoken agreement that here, no one would be mocked for speaking. Claire sat with her hands folded, eyes darting around, unsure if she'd actually say anything. Until the woman beside her leaned over and whispered, "The first poem is the scariest. The second one? That's when you realize you survived the first." Claire smiled barely, then pulled her notebook from her bag, the one they all laughed at. And this time, she read not with fear but with fire. Some rooms shrink you, not because you're small, but because the ceiling was built for shorter truths. But I've learned to stretch my voice until it makes the rafters groan. No one clapped. No one needed to, because every face was focused. Every eye was kind. And one person in the back had tears in his eyes. Not Keanu. Someone else. A man, late 30s, shoulders tight, hoodie worn. The kind of man who usually faded into walls. He raised his hand gently. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low. "But I have to ask, did you grow up in Westbrook?" Claire blinked. "Yeah." "Why? Did you have a teacher named Ms. Emery in 6th grade?" Her eyes widened. "I did. She gave me my first journal." The man exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for years. "I was her son. She passed last fall. Cancer." Claire's breath hitched. He continued. "She kept a folder of her students' work. Yours was in there, taped to the front. That poem about wanting to be a tree. So no one asks you to talk unless they mean it." Claire's throat closed. You're serious?" He nodded. "She said you'd be something. She said, Claire doesn't write poems. Claire translates silence." Claire covered her mouth. And for the first time since that classroom humiliation, she wept. Not from shame, but from being seen. Keanu leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Words don't expire," he said softly. "They echo. Sometimes for years. Sometimes through people we never meet." And that night, Claire didn't just read a poem. She became part of someone else's healing. A loop closed. And a new one opened. The email came 2 days later. Subject, Student Voices Spring Showcase Invitation. Claire stared at the screen. "We would be honored to feature your original work at this semester's Student Voices event, alongside select classmates from Comp Lit 204. There was her name, in black and white. A chance to stand in front of a mic again. But this time by invitation, not obligation. And then she scrolled down the lineup. Her stomach turned. Hunter's name was on the list. So were 3 others who had laughed. The same classmates who reduced her first reading to a punchline. She paced her dorm floor for nearly an hour. Was this growth? Or a trap? Would she be mocked again? Or would they pretend it never happened, now that Keanu had shown up and rewired the whole power dynamic? She messaged Keanu, not expecting a reply. But she needed to say something. "What if they only respect me now because they saw you respect me first?" The reply came 3 hours later. Direct. "Respect borrowed through fear isn't respect at all. But the courage to show up again? That's something they can't fake." Thursday night arrived. The auditorium was packed. Not stadium size, but enough to make the lights feel hotter than they should. Claire stood in the wings, gripping her new notebook, the one she started after Quiet Table. Hunter stood across the stage, sipping water. He saw her. Gave a weak nod. No smirk this time. Just nerves. The host took the mic. Next up, Claire Thomas, with an original spoken word piece titled, Second Draft. Applause. Claire stepped into the light. The mic loomed in front of her like a test. But this time, she didn't flinch. They laughed the first time. And it echoed so loud, I almost left my voice behind. But silence isn't strength. It's a muscle you can only flex so long before it cramps. So here I am. Still trembling. Still tender. Still standing. By the time she finished, there was no laughter. Only stillness. And then, applause. Not thunderous. Not theatrical. But real. In the back row, Keanu leaned against the wall. No spotlight. No announcement. But Claire saw him. And he gave a small nod. Like he'd been waiting for this version of her to arrive. 2 days after the showcase, Claire's inbox pinged with a message that made her freeze mid-sip of coffee. Subject: You probably don't remember me? The name at the top: Ms. Patel, 8th grade English. She opened the email slowly. Claire, I saw a video of your performance at the showcase. Someone posted it on Facebook, and it made its way through a thread of former teachers sharing proud student moments. I don't know if you remember, but you once wrote a short story in my class called The Window That Didn't Close. You were 13. It was about silence and how some people live in it like a house. I never forgot that piece. I saved it. I still have it. After watching your poem, I realized you didn't just grow into a writer. You grew into your own echo. I now run a small youth writing nonprofit in the city. We bring in writers to lead weekend workshops. I'd love for you to be one of them, if you're open to it. No pressure. Just pride. Miss P. Claire read the message twice. Then again. She did remember that story. Wrote it during lunch, when her parents were fighting over the phone bill and her classmates were fighting over boys. She remembered thinking, no one will care. But someone had. And now, that someone wanted her to teach. Not perform. Not defend. She forwarded the message to Keanu, unsure if he'd even reply. But 5 minutes later, her phone buzzed. Just one line. See? You weren't just writing your truth. You were building a door for someone else to walk through. That weekend, Claire took the train across the city. Small library. 3rd floor. Community room with folding chairs and scribbled flip charts. 8 middle schoolers waited inside. Nervous. But distracted. Claire stood in front of them with shaking hands. Hi, I'm Claire. I used to think poems were just fancy sadness. Now I think they're bravery in disguise. A few of them looked up. Interested. Open. And for the next hour, she didn't just share her work. She helped them shape theirs. When it ended, one girl, maybe 12, stayed behind. Eyes wide. Hair messy. Backpack heavier than her shoulders. Your voice sounds like mine. Claire kneeled down. That's because it used to be. The invitation came with a crisp email header and gold-accented text. Voices Forward. A celebration of emerging creators. Hosted by a prominent arts foundation. Venue, the Lyric Theater. Audience, hundreds. Claire reread it in disbelief. They wanted her to perform and speak about the role of vulnerability in art. It wasn't just a feature. It was a spotlight. The night of the event, Claire stood backstage, adjusting her blazer, the same one she wore to her first open mic since the incident. Now tailored. Confident. Hers. She inhaled. You belong here. She repeated it silently. Until a voice behind her said, Are you with the crew? Claire turned. A tall woman with a clipboard and blazer, clearly part of the foundation's board, gave her a professional smile and a once-over. Oh wait, Claire Thomas, right? Yes. The smile thinned. I just wanted to confirm, you're not formally published, correct? No MFA? Claire blinked. No. Not yet. Okay, no problem. She scribbled something on a clipboard. Just, for future consideration, we usually prioritize formally trained voices for these segments. Claire felt her throat close slightly. I was invited. Of course. Of course. The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. Just wanted to be sure you weren't expecting to be introduced as a scholar. Some donors are particular. Claire stepped away slowly. The voice in her head was no longer her own. It was every smirk in Lit 204. Every that was brave from a professor who didn't mean it. Every tight smile that said, "You're good for what you are." The curtains rustled. The host began introductions. And just as Claire tried to breathe through her rising doubt, a hand touched her shoulder. She turned. Keanu. Black shirt. Quiet expression. You look like someone just told you your story had an expiration date. Claire managed a small nod. They didn't say that. Just hinted that maybe I didn't earn the mic. Keanu looked past her at the stage. Then back. The mic doesn't belong to people who earned it. It belongs to the ones who know what it costs to use it. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded slip of paper. Read this. She unfolded it. It was a review. From years ago. Written about Keanu. Wooden. Still riding his matrix high. Lacks formal training in Shakespearean cadence. Claire looked up. He smiled. They said I didn't belong either. Until I made my space mine. Her name was being called. Lights shifted. The curtain opened. And as she stepped into the glow, she wasn't thinking about credentials. She was thinking about every kid who needed to hear someone like them speak. Claire stood center stage, mic in hand, the stage lights warming her skin as if they somehow knew this was a turning point. She looked out over the packed audience, students, professors, artists, strangers. But she didn't see individuals. She saw one shared silence, waiting to be filled. They told me vulnerability was optional. But I kept leaking truth even when I tried to stay dry. So I stopped apologizing for the flood. I became the storm. When she finished, the silence lingered, the kind that wraps a room in reverence. And then, thunderous applause. People stood. Some wiped tears. The host stepped up, grinning wide. Claire Thomas, everyone. A voice not just of her generation, but for anyone who's ever been made to feel like they were too much or not enough. Backstage, Claire leaned against the wall, the adrenaline leaving her in shaky waves. Keanu met her there, handing her a bottle of water. You didn't just speak, he said. You shifted the room. She smiled, exhausted and light. I'm glad you were here. I wasn't here for you, he said gently. I was here because I knew you'd be here for someone else. Just then, a woman approached, mid-30s, soft eyes, holding something small in her hand. Claire turned. Their eyes met, and Claire froze. Miss Sadie? The woman nodded slowly. I used to run the youth shelter in Westbrook. You were there. You wrote in the corner booth every afternoon. Claire's throat closed. You remember me? Sadie smiled. You gave me this. She unfolded a piece of paper. It was a poem Claire had written when she was 12, left folded on the front desk when she moved out. I am not empty, I'm just quiet. There's a difference. Claire's hands covered her mouth. You kept that? Sadie nodded. It reminded me that silence is an absence. Sometimes it's someone building their voice in the dark. Keanu stood to the side, watching. Not interfering. Just letting the past and present embrace in a moment no spotlight could outshine. Sadie handed Claire a letter. We're opening a new center in the city. We want a creative lead. Someone who doesn't just teach writing, but remembers why it matters. Claire looked at the envelope, then at her hands, and realized they weren't shaking anymore. The next morning, Claire sat on a bench near the library, the city breathing around her. In her hands, two things. A contract from a local publisher offering a book deal for her poetry collection. The letter from Sadie, offering a modest stipend and a full-time mentorship role at the youth center. One promised recognition. The other promised meaning. She didn't know which path to take. But she knew who to ask. She texted Keanu. Would you meet me? One last time. They met that evening at a quiet rooftop garden above a non-profit workspace. No one else around. The sun melting into the skyline. Claire didn't even speak at first. just handed him both letters. He took them, studied them, then looked out at the city. When I was younger, he said, I thought being seen was the goal. To be recognized, famous, applauded. And then I was. And it didn't fix anything that was broken inside me. I had the roles, the premieres, the posters with my face 10 feet tall. But after my sister got sick and my best friend passed, I'd go home and sit in silence. And I'd write. Claire sat forward. You write? Not scripts, he smiled. Letters. Notes. Words I couldn't say out loud. I never published them. Didn't want to. They weren't for the world. They were for me. He turned to her, eyes steady. Then one day, a friend read something I'd written and said, there's someone out there who needs this. Not to admire it, to survive it. That's when I realized, we don't write to be seen. We write so others know they're not alone. Claire swallowed the lump in her throat. So you're saying, take the center? Keanu smiled. I'm saying, follow the one that feels like home. Even if it's quieter. Even if no one claps. He stood, tucked his hands into his jacket. Spotlights fade. But the light you give others? That stays. Claire looked down at both papers again. Then slowly, ripped the publishing contract in half. Let it fall beside her on the bench. The city roared below. But inside, she had never felt quieter. Or more certain. It was a rainy Tuesday when Claire walked back into the lecture hall where it all began. Complet 204. Same rows. Same clock ticking slightly too loud. Same crooked poster on the wall about finding your narrative. But this time, Claire wasn't carrying a notebook. She was carrying a lesson plan. The professor, not the same one, greeted her warmly. Claire Thomas, our guest speaker today. Former student. Now author, mentor, and creative lead at the Quiet Table Center. The students blinked. Some looked her up on their phones, whispering. Others just watched. Uncertain. She stepped to the front, her boots soft on the tile, her heart loud and steady. Hi. I know this room. A few years ago, I read a poem in here and left wishing I never had. You don't remember that. But I do. A few students sat up straighter. Today I'm not here to talk about poetry. I'm here to talk about cruelty. Now the room was silent. Cruelty doesn't always look like screaming. Sometimes it looks like laughter during someone else's pain. Sometimes it looks like silence when someone needs defense. I don't blame you for that. Because I've done it too, sat quiet when I should have stood up. She paused, then added gently. But I also want to tell you something else. The voice you mock today might be the one that saves you tomorrow. A few students lowered their eyes. One raised a hand. So what made you keep going? Claire thought. A man who sat in the back and didn't clap. Didn't praise. He just listened, like what I said was already enough. Outside the classroom, leaning casually against the doorframe, was Keanu. Same hoodie. Same calm. He didn't step in. He didn't need to. Because she had already taken the stage. And this time, she owned it. As students filed out later, one girl slipped Claire a folded piece of paper. Claire opened it after the room emptied. I thought I was the only one writing in the dark. But now I know you were there too. Claire looked out the window at the gray sky breaking into sunlight. And smiled. Because this story didn't end in fame. It ended in echo. And echo travels. Farther than anyone expects. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, drop a comment. Speech balloon. Have you ever been mocked for speaking your truth? Tell us how you found your voice, or how you would have stood up for Claire. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe for more cinematic stories of kindness, courage, and Keanu level calm. Until next time, stay noble. Blue heart.